chat, you are more than welcome. And yeah, Claire is going to be talking to us all about hormones and yeah, how we can balance them to just be a bit better.
Yeah.
So how do you want to tell us your story about how you ended up creating Balanced Wellness?
Yes. So hello. Yeah, I'm Claire Snowdon-Darling, and I'm the founder of Balanced Wellness and also the creator of something called functional kinesiology, which I'm going to talk to you about, and the head and the founder of the College of Functional Wellness. And so basically everything I'm going to talk to you about today, we actually teach. I'm a clinician, I have private practice, but we also teach practitioners, because my big issue in the world is that there is a growing number of people with things like endometriosis, premature menopause, which is my story, which I'll tell you in a moment, PCOS, and the medical model, it's either cut it out or give you hormones, and there's not very much else that they're looking at. And my experience, I mean, especially with people with things like PMDD who are having hysterectomies, is that very often it's not the magic bullet, because it's not dealing with the underlying condition. So a lot of people are going down the surgery route and then still finding that they've actually still got symptoms, and the medical model doesn't really understand why. So this is what we're going to start shedding some light on. So I actually got into doing what I do after I had my daughter in 2004, and we both nearly died during the experience. And it left me with postpartum psychosis, postnatal depression, and chronic fatigue syndrome, which was undiagnosed because the medical model don't like diagnosing chronic fatigue, but it absolutely was proper chronic fatigue, or any of the diagnose it in this country. And I lived with that for 15 years. And at some point in that journey, I got diagnosed with PTSD, and it was just really incredibly challenging. But I started retraining. I used to work in theatre and specialised in people with learning disabilities, and had a charity and did that and loved it, but couldn't carry on when I was mentally unwell. And basically started to get interested in health and nutrition because I was so unwell. And then this weird therapy called kinesiology found me, and I literally turned up to a training course, having never had the therapy, and just heard the word and every single hair on my body stood up on end, and just knew I had to sign up to a course. And I sat there in 2007 on the first day of this course and realized that this is what I was meant to do with my life. So I was doing everything right, and doing everything that I've been trained to do, and I added in a load of other modalities, but I still wasn't getting better. And it got to the point where it was really, really bad. And I'd been sent down the road of gynecologists. I was having, mid-cycle bleeds. I was piling on weight. The mood swings were horrendous. And nobody could tell me what was wrong. And the gynecologist's response was, well, let's do an endometrial ablation, because clearly that's the problem. And it was only when I actually got sent to a private endocrinologist that he started taking it seriously. And once they actually did some blood tests, they discovered that I was in early menopause, or premature ovarian failure. So this then, for me, I was like, how? I have been walking my talk and doing everything right for 10 years. How have I ended up here? And along with that and a lot of other stress, I had to send myself off on a sabbatical. And we took myself over to Australia for 4 weeks. I was like, I've just got to clear my head. This is quite a lot to take in. And I just felt so awful. And I was sat there with my friend in Byron Bay Beach, and she had recently become a single mum, and in Sydney, one of the most expensive cities in the world, just become a freelancer, was stressed to the eyeballs, was comfort eating a lot of food, but was having these horrendous periods. And they were talking all the things. They were talking about hormones or surgery or whatever. And I just sat there and I drew this triangle out in my journal, and I explained to her how her diet with her stress hormones combined was causing an issue in her female hormones. And I just sat there and went, that's quite an interesting way of describing it. And came back to the UK and just happened to mention it to my business partner. And she was like, oh, that's interesting. Maybe we could do a couple of one-day workshops around it. So she then started to, this is how it goes in my world, is I have like a creatively brilliant idea, and then she goes and does all the research. And she did a load of research, and she realized that no one else was talking about this and this connection. They would talk about elements of it, but no one else was talking about it. And no one else was talking about how digestion and immune issues are also therefore victims of these three hormones. So we started to create some workshops, and the next thing you know, we'd actually created quite a lot of workshops, and we sent them off to our governing body to say, look, I think some practitioners would be interested in learning this. And they came back and said, you've invented a whole new arm of kinesiology, go away and start a college. So that was in 2018. And so we had quite a few hoops to jump through, but we have actually, you know, now taught a few years of not only now kinesiology practitioners, but also functional wellness coaches, which is for people who don't want to do a therapy, but want to understand hormones, hormone protocols, diet, and how we can deal with these issues. Because for years I've been saying we're in the middle of a global health crisis, and I'm not talking about the pandemic. I'm talking about this huge surge in PMDD wasn't a thing. Endometriosis was incredibly rare. Fibromyalgia was, you know, you had about 1 in thousands of people who had it. It's everywhere now. We've got autoimmune diseases coming out of our ears, and no one's really addressing why. And so that has become our absolute mission, is to empower and educate people to understand what's going on, to be able to take informed action to manage their symptoms, and then also to educate more practitioners so that more and more people have access to this information. That's how and why I do what I do.
That's amazing. Just go away and start a college.
Yeah. We were like, great. And actually I said to my business partner the other day, because we're in the middle of student exams at the moment, and I can't even tell you how much marking there is. And I just looked at her and went, if in 2017 we'd have known it would have been like this, do you think we'd have done it? And she went, nope. Nope.
It sounds a lot like the trustees of the charity, because I sort of go, oh, do you know what, this is really a problem. And yeah, the other girls that are in the charity go, we need to research that. Let's research it and sit. And yeah, we always go, there's a gap there. Let's fill it. And that is the exciting thing, I think, at the moment, because things like endometriosis are still, you know, the medical model, oh, we don't know where the inflammation comes from, SOS. There is so much potential for us to really start to understand what's going on in the human body. And that is absolutely, you know, what drives us. Yeah. It seems like people are finally going, let's look at these issues as like a whole body thing, not just, oh, it's happening in your uterus and your ovaries.
Exactly. That myopic approach. And one of the things I do a lot now is I spend an awful lot of time on Clubhouse and on panels in Clubhouse and in forum debates with GPs, with other alternative health practitioners, because specifically around menopause and hormones, because what I've come to understand through my journey is, again, and I'm not bashing the NHS, but they have so much, they're so under-resourced and they have so many limitations, that their approach to HRT is it's a sledgehammer approach. And especially in young people who have, you know, gone into chemically, you know, created or surgically created menopause, it can wreak havoc in the body. And I'm seeing this phenomenon of women who are menopausal going through it, and the HRT isn't touching the sides. In fact, it's bringing on a load of other symptoms, which wasn't the case in the 1980s. And so for me, it's about this global picture of, well, what else is going on and what actually was the underlying issues to begin with, because it's not working. So I've tried the gamut. I've, you know, done the medical HRT, and I'm now on bioidentical hormones, and I understand the natural route, and some people get through it that way. So we can answer all those questions.
Yeah, because like one of the things with endo is obviously we're having our hormones like tweaked constantly. We're either we're given birth control methods to shut off, to basically repress our periods, as if that's gonna just be a fix. And then if they don't work, obviously we have the surgery, the excision stuff, but that kicks off a whole host of issues in the body anyway. But then you've got the chemical surgical menopause, and like we're seeing girls like as young as like 15, 16, and they're being put into like chemical menopause.
It's unreal, isn't it? I mean, my daughter, bless her, is incredibly estrogen dominant. She's just coming up 18. Would never listen to me, obviously, and totally her own person. So she is, struggling right now with weight. She struggles with hirsutism. I'm absolutely watching her walk into PCOS and doing everything I can to support her and stop that. But I absolutely know that if I took her to the doctor right now, they'd be sticking her on contraceptive pill, which would make it a million times worse. And I absolutely know that, because it's an estrogen dominant issue. And that's actually the same with endo. It just doesn't make sense to me that when you've got an estrogen dominant issue, putting more estrogen on the problem. I just think that we are in a time where, with some education, with some empowerment, with a little bit of understanding about what's going on in our bodies, we can start to challenge the medical model, because there's so much research that's come out of nutritional science in functional nutrition in the past 10 years, that we can now sit there comfortably and go, no, this isn't the right approach, and for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, definitely. Me and Crystal, one of the other trustees, have had this conversation over and over and over again about estrogen, and like the trans community with endo. We're like, why are we not studying these people? Because,
oh my gosh,
yeah, it's just absolutely insane why these people. Oh, where's Nicola gone? I was just about to read out what she had wrote. Hopefully she comes back, because Nicola is one of the people that I really wanted to talk about. Right, so hopefully she's come back.
I haven't come across the endo issue in the trans community.
Well, yeah, it's massive, and
wow.
It's not talked about enough, and because it's not talked about enough, that's why no one knows about it. But Nicola's back now, and she said she feels like your story is the same as her story. She's now in surgical menopause, and her mental health is appalling. She also has PND and awful PMD. She was put on the pill at the age of 14 due to the painful periods. And Nicola's story is, I know Nicola personally, and she's amazing for getting through what she has got through.
I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? I mean, thank you for sharing that. And I hear this stuff day in, day out, and it absolutely breaks my heart, because I just feel that with the reductionist way that women's health is dealt with it's barbaric. It's just barbaric. And I just hope that it changes for future generations. I just hope that there is enough of us starting to make a noise and starting to shout out. It breaks my heart.
Insha has put, I'm on the progesterone only pill that's working for our pain, but I really would love to be hormone free. Would love to try a natural approach after surgery, like functional medicine, but I feel like nothing will help due to many hormones messing my body up, like Zoladex.
Okay, so can we just talk about the progesterone only bit, because that is a big issue. So hormones in the hormones in our body, we have estrogen, which obviously is, all of the juicy reproductive stuff, bone health, energy, clarity, all of that lovely stuff. But when there's too much of it, every single cell in our body has a receptor for estrogen. And the problem is there are many, many things in the environment that can mimic estrogen. And this is where we can end up with estrogen dominance. And so estrogen dominance, we can get it from toiletries, we can get it from plastics, we can get it from pesticides, pollution, all of those things. So we're starting to see globally a massive estrogen dominance issue. And so this is quite evident in, for example, men with obesity, where they get the man boobs. This is because of its estrogen. And a lot of A lot of diabetes, when there's an obesity with it, it's actually an estrogen dominance issue. So just telling people to change their diet and exercise more is, again, so reductionist, because there's an estrogen dominance. So we have to talk about, why is there an estrogen dominance? I'm going to make a note because my menopause brain will forget, because this is a really important point that I don't want to forget. So estrogen, really important in the right doses, but obviously endometriosis is an estrogen dominance issue first and foremost. And so the question is, why is there an estrogen dominance? So one of the main causes of that, there are many reasons for estrogen dominance, and I'm going to talk to you about them in more depth. But one of the main reasons why we end up with estrogen dominance is because we are actually born stressed these days. So, I was born in 1976. I wasn't necessarily born stressed, but being a child of the 80s, it was my generation who were really the first generation who were told, you have to have it all. So right from the word go, we were battling and fighting, and it was incredibly stressful. And also food, our soils became very depleted in the 1980s. We started adding a lot more pesticides in 1969, actually, and we hybrid our grains. We just ruined the food chain in the sort of 60s to the 80s. So we became stressed. But people basically born, 80s onwards are born stressed, because they're essentially being born to mothers who are coming from this depleted environment. Now, what that means is this stress word. Why am I going on about it? Well, the really interesting thing with stress is, you might not have heard about something called the pregnenolone steal. So in our bodies, we make a hormone called pregnenolone, and it's actually made from fat. So people on a low-fat diet will end up in the pregnenolone steal very easily. So pregnenolone makes progesterone. Now, progesterone is an incredibly important hormone. So this is, obviously, we think of it as being the womb thickening hormone, which for endo, not so great. But it's not just that, actually. And this is where, again, the medical model is incredibly reductionist. So they say to women that have had their uteruses removed, they shouldn't have progesterone because they haven't got a uterus. But when you go into the functional medical world and the experts there, they're like, we're absolutely going to give you progesterone, because progesterone is what stops women going mental, like literally mental. PMDD, PMT, all of those things. Progesterone is calming. It's that second trimester, I'm so chilled, I feel stoned feeling. It's what makes us sleep. It's good memory. It's everything. I mean, progesterone is so important. Now, the problem is, if we have any stress, and by stress, I'm talking about foods that we could be intolerant to, so wheat, milk, sugar, actual stress, because, well, let's be honest, being human is pretty bloody stressful. So financial pressure, relationship pressure, child pressure, anything, work pressure, environmental factors, pesticides, pollution, those toxic chemicals in toiletries, eating the wrong foods at the wrong time, doing the wrong kind of exercise. What will happen is our body will produce stress hormone. Now, the reason why this is important is because our body will choose to make cortisol instead of progesterone. Because when you think about it from a functional perspective, is it more important, a stress hormone, to get us away from the saber-toothed tiger, or is it more important for us to hold and carry a baby? It's more important to get us away from the saber-toothed tiger. So we end up with this reduced amount of progesterone, which means that if you've got progesterone and estrogen during their little cycle, what happens is progesterone starts to fall off a cliff, or we're born with it falling off a cliff. And that definitely was the case, I see with my daughter, because I was very depleted when I had her in my 20s, and then the stress that we went through, progesterone falls off a cliff. That means that by default, we have more estrogen. And the second we have more estrogen to progesterone, we actually now have an inflammatory response going on in the body. And this plays out so perfectly in perimenopause, where you see people getting the brain fog and the overwhelm and the anxiety and the weight gain and the joint pain. But obviously, in the case of endo, this can be happening, from teens. So the problem with the progesterone only pill, or things like the Mirena coil or anything like that, is that they're not progesterone. They're actually made with a synthetic called progestin. Now, if you look at the chemical composition of progesterone and progestin, they're completely different. And progestin actually looks more like testosterone. Now, testosterone is a ramp you up hormone. So guess what? Now we're like wired. Now we're completely jittery. Now we are anxious. Now we are all those things. We haven't got the calming hormone. But the calming hormone is actually available through the NHS, but they don't like to give it out to women because it costs them £3 a day as opposed to 34p a day. So you have to be really educated to go and ask for it. And so, you know, people who are put on the, I see it play out. I've had clients come into my clinic, endometriosis, put on the pill at 14, you know, infertility issues, and then hysterectomies by this age, and then they're having, you know, now they're on HRT and they're having blood clots, and this is by the age of 30. And I just literally look at it and go, oh my gosh, if they gave you that natural progesterone when you were 17, you would have not been in any of this pickle. It's heartbreaking. So the first thing is, if you really want to sort of empower yourself around hormones, is first off, if you're talking about the progesterone only pill or a combination pill or a coil, then start using the word progestin, because I tell you, start saying that to a doctor. Nope, I don't want progestin, I want progesterone, because progestin isn't going to stop that estrogen dominance.
That's that was pretty mind-blowing. I didn't know that. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
That makes a lot of sense, because a lot of the people in like our support group that are on like the progesterone only pill do suffer a lot with like their mental health and just being stressed, stressed all the time.
Because it's not the progesterone, so we feel crazy. And I mean, I remember they gave me the Mirena coil. I was having a fit of madness when I agreed to it. And because also they say, oh, it's localized. It's not. How can something be localized? You've got a blood system. Like, what? I don't understand that. And I just remember being like properly I've never had anxiety in my life, like literally jittery.
I was the same when I had the pill. I had the coil, sorry. I hated it.
Awful. Someone's asking if you'd ask for progesterone. Yes, but in the UK, it's called Utrogestan, Utrogestan. And it's one of those things that, I mean, I'm always telling my clients, go in and ask for this. This is the thing that you want.
Yeah.
And accept no substitutes, Utrogestan. The only issue with that is if people have got a peanut allergy, it's made with peanut oil. So it's not amazing for everyone. But again, it might be in, you know, if you haven't got a peanut allergy, it's worth trying. Utrogestan, Utrogestan.
Lovely. Brilliant. I can put that little snippet in the support group later. Right, Nicola has got a really, really awful story about work and how they've treated her since she's been in the menopause. And she's on a huge dose of estrogen, 6 pumps a day, to try and help her mental health. Her personal experience of progesterone has not been good. When on progesterone only hormone, I was very upset, angry, and the same on the Mirena coil.
So that was the progestin, right?
Yeah.
And 6 pumps of estrogen is a huge amount. And I mean, I get clients coming in broken. We have to do a big estrogen detox we have to get that progesterone balance right. So big estrogen detox to get you on the right level of estrogen, but you've got to have that real progesterone coming in. So if you're on HRT, you know, I would definitely be saying, I need that Utrogestan. And again, I will accept no substitute. Do not fob me off with the progestin. And actually, do you know what's terrifying? There's a lot of GPs don't even know about it. And they'll literally sit there looking through their book and go, oh, no, I can actually order it. And you go, yep, you can. So you are having to educate them.
Yeah, definitely. Nicola, I think you need to get in touch with Claire and set up an appointment or something. Because I think you're being fobbed off a little bit at work, and I know how bad you have it. It might just be worth a conversation with Claire. Definitely.
They've now made it. It's now become. I can't remember the exact terms. My friends in HR, but they have actually now made menopause a disability in the workplace, haven't they? I mean, doesn't that show how many of us are having awful menopauses? Like, that shows, because that never was a thing before. So if they're being that awful, I'm delighted you're taking them to court, because yeah. Bloody right.
Yeah, it's a massive thing Nicola's going through at the moment. She's amazing for getting through it.
Wow, yeah.
What is kinesiology?
Kinesiology. I know everyone goes, what? So kinesiology. So I was like, in my teens, I was always interested in complementary therapies, but back then it was, you either become a reflexologist, health and beauty, and do reflexology, or you become an osteopath and a physio. And I was like, not drawn to any of those. So went down the theatre route. But what I loved when I found kinesiology was it kind of like made everything make sense. So real quickly, kinesiology was discovered in the 1960s by a chiropractor called Dr. Goodhart, great name, and he would discover that he would click people and then they go away, and 2 weeks later they'd be back, and he was like, well, we're not fixing them. And he was the first person. We find this kind of makes sense to us now. We go, oh yeah, but back then it was like revolutionary. I know, it's the best name. And so basically he said, if you've got problems here, it's not that muscle, it's this muscle not doing its job. So we now understand that this sort of law of opposites, that's kind of used in things like PT. Well, if you've got a weakness here, we'll strengthen up here. So he started, if you go and see a chiropractor or a physio, even a doctor, they'll do like a muscle response test, right? Well, what Dr. Goodhart discovered was that a lot of people that were coming in with the same issue in their shoulders also had the same physical symptoms. And he was like, what is going on there? And so he worked in a working hospital, he did autopsies, and he discovered that there are 48 muscles in our body that are linked via nerves into organs. So when we're actually doing a muscle test on, for example, the quads, we're actually having a conversation with the small intestine. So a lot of people have bad knees because they've got bad digestion. Hormones, as it happens, are all muscles in your glutes, so the piriformis, so hips, glutes, inner thighs, and so many people will have bad backs, glute issues, can't squat for toffee because they haven't got any glutes, and just really struggling around that area. It's a real sign of like this hormonal imbalance, or holding weight over your hips and bum. That's like a real sort of like glute imbalance. And so when he then discovered this, using this muscle testing, now we're having this conversation. Now we can really start to get into it. And when we find an imbalance, so say we find the quads or something in the glutes, we then look at what we call the Bs. So B for biochemical. So we're looking at foods that we could be intolerant to, causing the problem, or nutritional supplementation that could fix it. So in the case of estrogen dominance, I'm looking at things like estrogen detoxes, natural estrogen detoxes. I'm looking at certain herbs to boost up that progesterone. We're looking at all those kind of things. Within the Bs, we also then have the emotional realm. So kinesiologists learn how to do quite a lot of, holding emotional space, because I mean, just even from hearing your stories, like this stuff that we're dealing with, it's big, right? So it's not like just going to a physio where it's all mechanical. We really want to look at the fact that the emotions can keep us in our physical symptoms. Then there's the electrical realm. So this is, we work with things like the acupuncture meridians and things like that. So so we get to play around with acupressure holding points and things. And then the S is for structure. So this is where we are literally looking at, we do things like uterine lifts for people who have like the dropped cervixes. We do manipulations on valves in the bowel. We do jaw manipulations. So that stems back to the chiropractic work, and then obviously the work on those muscles. So we kind of get to be 4 therapists in one, which is really, really exciting.
Yeah, that's it. It just makes sense, doesn't it? It's one of the things we're working really, really hard on at the moment, is like the mental health side of things, and linking up the endo nurses to the psychological services in the area, because it's massive. It's really, really massive. And it's something I've learned through yoga, is that actually calming down everything will help with the pain.
Yeah.
And this referred pain, like you say it, like the pain it is in our glutes and like our and all of that. Like a lot of people with endo actually they complain of like hip and like the thigh pain.
Yeah.
Is massive. They're like, oh my god, my thighs are killing me.
I know.
So it makes
amazing.
Yeah.
Because I don't know which came first, because I had to have major hip surgery in 2016, and apparently it was a birth defect. So I'm like, well, I always talk about being the birth trauma that put me into, this early menopause, and maybe it wasn't. Maybe the birth defect actually then caused the reverse issue, and I was always going to have hormone problems, or the hormone problems have definitely got worse since then. It's fascinating when you start looking at it.
Yeah, it's like, oh my god, which one came first? Because I'm always like that. I never heard about endo, but then when I found out about endo, I was like, oh my god, all of them issues that I went to see all of these different doctors for, was it actually the endo, or was it them that then caused it? And oh my
god, isn't it 8 years the average person takes to get their diagnosis?
Yeah,
outrageous.
It's absolutely crazy. Crystal has asked, what would be your number one piece of advice for balancing hormones?
Brilliant question. So this is going to sound really, really unsexy and dull, but I'm going to go back to my triangle of hormonal health, and where I start always, and I'll tell you the reason, is with blood sugars. And blood sugar stabilization is absolutely key. And the reason for that is when our blood sugars become unstable, what happens is, for example, if our blood sugars drop, we produce the stress hormone cortisol. And guess what? When we're producing cortisol, we're not producing progesterone, right? So we need to keep our blood sugars balanced. And also, when our blood sugars drop, we then tend to eat something, especially if we're really hungry, we'll eat something maybe carby. Blood sugars are going to rise. We're going to produce insulin. Insulin is very pro-inflammatory. So now we're starting to perpetuate this cycle of things, of an inflammatory response. So blood sugar stabilization, people think, well, I'm eating regularly, or I'm eating healthily, and actually I'm going to go out on a limb and say that there's a lot of the vegan diets that aren't helping here, because what we need at every single meal, I know, is a protein source, a fat source, a good couple of fat sources, and then the right amount of carbohydrates. So I'm going to talk you through what I mean by that. So by proteins, the only proteins that are pure protein sources and not combined with anything else, because you've got a lot of foods that are protein and fat, like cheese or nuts. But the only protein sources are meat, fish, eggs, and then I would say protein powders at a push, so the vegan protein powders, and tofu. But you've got endometriosis, you don't want tofu because it's estrogen, so you don't want it. Like, don't have that. I give that to postmenopausal women who've got vaginal dryness. You do not need tofu. So we have a real problem, you can see, particularly with the vegan diet, because when people are trying to get their protein from nuts, well, that's a fat. So now what we've got is not enough protein, too much fat. And if people are then saying, well, I'm getting it from my chickpeas, well, they're a starchy carbohydrate, and it's the carbohydrates that are causing this blood sugar imbalance. So, well, okay, but you've got more carb in there than you've got protein. So we need that protein source. So this is why I talk about the protein powders, the vegan blend protein powders being your get out of jail free card, because then you can just pimp them out. The problem is they're not particularly bioavailable. And if you've got an inflammatory condition like endometriosis, you will have gut dysbiosis. So it's hard for our bodies to take them in. So I do have a lot of people coming to see me who are vegan, and they're like, okay, well, what am I going to do? And I'm like, can you consider organic eggs at least? Like, can you consider something, what can we get you better? And then, we can look at some other bits and pieces. And there are a lot of people who say no, and that's fine. So we look at, the protein powders, but it is really, really worth, checking in with yourself about, okay, this protein imbalance does cause a big issue. So that is the first port of call. Proteins, fats, all the leafy greens, because they're good for estrogen clearing, but then it's really sort of like a half cup of starchy carbohydrates per meal, which actually isn't that much.
Oh, we have a couple of vegans.
Sure.
Crystal is herself a vegan. So So yeah, I'm sure that gave a couple of people some a little bit of a
there are ways to do it. It's interesting, you crave eggs. I hear that quite a lot, and some other people just go, every now and again I just crave some chicken and then I hate myself. And I'm like, okay, you don't have to eat chicken. But yeah, it's really interesting because it's interesting that you say, yeah, I hear you couldn't do it. There is something really fascinating about veganism as a mindset, because I see, like, you know, the whole gamut of people eating all sorts of different stuff, but there is something really interesting about I just couldn't. It's like it's fascinating. But protein powders with everything, then, like, you've got to pimp out everything with the vegan protein powders.
Fabulous. Nicola's asked, is progesterone only from our ovaries?
No.
She has no ovaries. She's the same as me. She's had a complete hysterectomy. Everything's gone.
No, we also make progesterone and estrogen in our adrenal glands, which is why you can have a hysterectomy and still have endometriosis symptoms, because we're still making the estrogen. And so then we have to come back to, well, what's going on in those adrenal glands? And so this is the pregnenolone steal situation. So this is where we have to be looking at blood sugars and stress in a massive, massive way. And, you know, we are exceptionally good at doing too much. And I say that as someone who has to, you know, rein myself in on a regular basis, because that's what got me in this mess. But yes, stress is huge. And we've also been sort of taught ourselves that stress is cool, or I thrive on it, or whatever. And actually that's kind of a trauma response. And we really need to learn how to get into, nervous system health. Yeah, all of that.
Yeah. Crystal's she's my yoga teacher. Love her. And yeah, she's been the one that's sort of gone, you need to step back, you need to breathe, you need to get your nervous system
absolutely
back down.
Absolutely, because we will not, and especially you vegans, if we've got two sides of the nervous system, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. Parasympathetic is wind down and digest. So if you're using your protein powders, you need all of the energy that you can to digest that, to make it more bioavailable. If you're stressed, guess what? We stay in the get up and go one. We don't actually digest properly. So we're not going to be pulling all the proteins out of the foods that we're eating.
So I have had a total hysterectomy. And I'm kind of the thought that I want to go down the natural route for like my HRT and stuff like that, because every time I go on my HRT, it doesn't feel right. I just feel antsy and I gain loads of weight. And
what have they put you on?
It's the combined patch.
So you should not be having estrogen. I mean, firstly, you're too young. So you shouldn't be having estrogen. So I would be first and foremost. So it depends what you say, the natural route, because you can, you know, back in the day, you know, our great aunties could have got through with a bit of black cohosh and, you know, a fan, and that was all they needed. Personally, like some people say, well, I don't want to go on the synthetic HRT and the medical stuff. So something like Eutrogestin that I was talking about, that's made from yams. And I'm like, yes, it's a body identical hormone. So it's a strong sort of version of the yam progesterone, but it is natural. So is that so some people, they go, yeah, I'm prepared to do that. I would absolutely be demanding to see a specialist and keep on asking for second opinions until you find one who understands that you can have progesterone when you've had a hysterectomy. I've got clients who come in and their doctors, they've had hysterectomies and their doctor's given them Eutrogestin. I'm like, that GP is the holy grail. And then I have others who go, no, they will not give it to me. And I'm like, and what I'm seeing, and I'm sure all of your members, you know, combined stories, is this inconsistency. It's massive inconsistency, and it just depends on the training of the GP. So, you know, if you go and see a functional medical practitioner, the problem with that is it costs you thousands for those doctors. They understand that you need progesterone as a woman, so they'll give it to you. But you can keep finding the GP or the endocrinologist or the what do we call them?
I've been shouting to go to an endocrinologist for ages because I've had blood tests that have shown that my cortisol levels are really low as well. And I'm like, I need to see an endocrinologist because I need to know what's going on with my hormones, and they're just not referring me, and it's driving me insane.
Yeah, that's really insane. Although they won't be able to help you with low cortisol because they're not really interested in if you've got any cortisol at all. So we understand that so it used to be that we thought that low cortisol was basically your adrenals producing too much cortisol and then they get exhausted. But what's really interesting is cortisol is an anti-inflammatory. And so there comes a point, so my history with chronic fatigue was low cortisol, so I couldn't get out of bed.
Yeah, because I've got chronic fatigue.
Exhausted. But what we now know is that the reason that we have low cortisol is because the body doesn't want to make inflammation. And so it doesn't want an anti-inflammatory. It's something like there's an underlying parasite or gut dysbiosis or something that the body is going, it's being really clever. It's going, I can't put an anti-inflammatory here. I need the inflammation. So this is why there's also a lot of interest and speculation now in the nutritional science world around endometriosis being underlying parasites, gut dysbiosis, and because of course that massive connection with the uterus and the bowel, huge connection. So the fact that low cortisol is there also then suggests, wow, there could be this gut dysbiosis, and because of that your body doesn't want to stick in the anti-inflammatories. It's trying to get the inflammation there to kill off the parasites. It's like when we stop seeing that our body's doing something wrong and we start seeing what it's trying to tell us, it all makes sense.
Definitely.
But I would definitely be talking, I'll go to specialist after specialist and don't let up until you go, I know I can have that utrogestin. I know other women who've had hysterectomies can have it and I bloody well want it.
Yeah, so I shouldn't be on the combined patch.
100% not. I basically say to people, especially at the kind of age that you are, that the problem is if we don't take any kind of HRT, we are shortening our lifespans. We are looking at increased, heart disease. We're looking at, bone density issues. We are causing ourselves massive long-term ramifications. And there are routes that we can take. Yes, we can do it naturally. I'd suspect if you've got low cortisol, you've got, surgical menopause, it might be a bit late for a bit of chaste tree herbs. That could be beneficial, but it's probably not going to be the fix. So then we can go on to bioidentical hormones that you can get through practitioners like me, which are just low dose and they go on your skin. Again, I've got people in their 50s who just a little bit of that, they were really healthy going into it, a few hot flushes, and that's all that they need. And I'm delighted for them. But most of the time, for most of the women I work with, I get to the point where those bioidenticals aren't working anymore and I need to send them to the doctor for the utrogestin. Someone like me, I had to work with a specialist because even that utrogestin was nowhere near enough of the progesterone that I needed. But I say to women that really they only need the estrogen, especially with an estrogen dominant condition. Once you've worked out why you were estrogen dominant, so in my case, it was actually a gut dysbiosis that was elevating my histamine and causing me to just keep making more and more and more xenoestrogens in my body. So you've got to clear that. And then I would only be recommending it when women are really starting to look at things like vaginal dryness. That is like, and my experience is that is way down the menopause journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Incha has asked, can B6 help endo patients? I've read something online regarding hormones.
Yeah, B6 is great for hormone balance, but as part of a bigger picture. So I'd be looking at omega-3. I'm a big fan of the vegan omega-3, not flaxseed. So flaxseed is 3, 6, and 9, which is actually omega-6 is highly inflammatory. You need omega-3, but the vegan omega-3s are made from algae, which is how fish have high omega-3 anyway, because they eat the algae. Yeah. So omega-3 for inflammation, I tend to think of. I also look at L-arginine, which is an amino acid, which is great. It produces nitric oxide, gets rid of inflammation. People talk about things like curcumin and turmeric, but my experience is that's more joint pain inflammation, not this internal tissue inflammation. Along with a B complex, I'd say B6 on its own can actually put quite a lot of stress on your liver.
Yeah, Fantastic.
And ultimately, it's about reducing, I'd say removing wheat, milk, sugar, 100% wheat and milk, because they are awful and estrogenic, and protein, fats and carbs.
Yeah, like I'm really excited because this year up in Edinburgh, there's actually a PhD starting that is specifically looking at the endo diet that everyone's talking about. So eliminating the inflammatory foods. And I'm so excited about that because like I did my undergrad degree in health and nutrition.
Wow.
So I am now someone's actually specifically researching it. I'm so excited. There's really going to be science behind it at last.
There is going to be science behind it. Apart from there's science behind the low FODMAPs diet, and I kind of go, but because they also don't bring out things like they don't look at things like wheat, which are actually big gateway allergens and cause such immune inflammation.
Yeah, absolutely. Crystal said, sorry, she's going back to the protein question.
Okay, that's fine.
And she said, how many eggs would you need to make an impact? And is weight gain around the waist a sign of estrogen dominance? She's gained weight around her waist. She has untreated PCOS and she's never, ever, ever used any form of birth control.
Okay, great. So that weight gain around the middle, that is absolutely estrogen dominance and cortisol. So that's the stress hormone cortisol. So again, I would be looking at where's the lack of progesterone that's causing the cortisol issue? So what would that be? So when we look at the stressors, I'm going to go back to the protein. So how many eggs would make a difference? I mean, even if you could get a couple, even if you would just start off with a few times a week and then start to see how you feel with that and build up, but making sure you are getting, and I would say combine your protein powders. So the hemp, rice and pea at every meal, the protein powders themselves. So I tell people to stick them in ketchup, stick them in your soup, stick them in your smoothies, like pimp out everything, pimp out your peanut butter, everything has to be pimped out with protein powders. And then if you can get a few eggs in as well, then you are really going to be starting to help make a difference.
And Nicola, you are not a barrel on legs at all.
I'm currently, because I call it a cult weight gain when we have these hormone issues. And I've been on good bioidentical hormones for over a year, but I had my hormones tweaked by my doctor. And because it turns out in my blood test, I had enough estrogen for a 65-year-old, but not for a 45-year-old running 3 businesses. And so she's like, well, we'll tweak your estrogen. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. And, loads of energy. And I was like, great. Apart from this enormous muffin top that I just went, oh my God, I can't get in my jeans, and nothing else changed. It's like, it is a cult. This weight gain comes out of nowhere. So it is really frustrating. And so in those cases, then I say to people, actually, just for a few weeks, ditch the starchy carbs. We'll be okay without them. Protein and the greens and good fats. And that's what we really need because we become very insulin resistant. Going back to my triangle, we become very insulin resistant. So we just don't clear those blood sugars. The chubby muffin top club, that's me. I'm in that.
I think we are a little bit, all of us are a little bit. And when doctors say hormones can't cause weight gain.
Oh my God.
And it's like, yes,
really?
it can.
Really, come live in my body for 5 minutes and I'll show you. I literally stood on the scales the other day. I was saying to my partner, I went, how have I put, I do so much exercise and I eat so carefully. I was like, how have I put on 2 kilos in 3 days? That's mental. I was like, I suddenly felt really weighty. I was like, I'm just going to weigh myself, and went, oh my God, 2 kilos in 3 days. That is ridiculous. That's just ridiculous.
Yeah, it is. It's crazy. What have I got right down? I think we've covered all of the questions I've actually wrote down. Yes. Oh, Katrina, what's your advice for people who are worried to stop their hormone treatment? She's on the pill and has an IUD for endo. The endo's under control, but she doesn't want the crazy side effects.
Yeah, I hear you. And the only thing I can say is find a really good practitioner to work with. One of the big issues I hear over and over and over in Clubhouse is like I said, I think did I say this earlier? Did I say it to you? Did I say it to someone else? I can't, menopause brain, I can't remember. But the problem is that women with hormone issues need deep pockets, and that is sadly the state of affairs right now. And it's crap. And I understand that I am a practitioner who charges money for this, but I equally have to spend vast quantities of money with my doctor on Harley Street for bioidenticals because I can't be serviced, any other way. And it's not okay. And it's not okay that medical insurance doesn't cover it. But basically, I would say find a good practitioner who can really support you. I have so many endo clients who have gone, okay, it's time to come off of that. And honestly, we're all terrified of doing it, but with the right approach, so being incredibly consistent with diet, cleaning out, your stress, your emotional stuff, all of those things, being on the right supplements, because the right supplements will put scaffolding around your body, plus some bioidenticals, or getting the right thing from your GP. That's actually when you can make change. But as much as I'd like to say, like, here's the step-by-step guide, everyone's so different. And I personally, I wouldn't have been able to do it without a therapist. I'm not wanting to put limiting beliefs on you, but it is a big deal. And so I would say working with someone, one of my clients with menopause said it to me recently. She went, every time she had a wobble, she was able to email, I would be able to go, okay, I know where we're going with this. I'm holding your hand. Let's keep going. And it's someone who can actually see where you're going and when you're having that wobble. And I have to do the same with my doctor. And I know everything that she's going to tell me, but when we're in it, it's terrifying.
Yeah, like I'm totally the same. I can tell people with endo everything, and I can be there and go, look, I know where you're going with this. I know what advice to give you and everything. But then when I'm sat in front of the consultant and they go, you can't possibly still have endometriosis when you've had a hysterectomy, I'm like,
well, actually, funny enough, we make estrogen in our adrenal glands, and an inflammatory response has nothing to do with my uterus.
Exactly.
Very limiting.
Katrina says, amazing answer. Thank you, Claire.
You are very, very welcome.
It seems like all things women's health, or like people assigned female at birth health, is no one knows anything about it. No one knows anything about it at all, and no one's willing to look at us as a whole body unless, like you say, you've got deep pockets.
Well, I mean, I didn't watch the Davina McCall program, but I think the bombshell that came out of it was that it's not mandatory that GPs actually do any training on this stuff. And I mean, I know that I've had some real GP brutality, and I've had some awful experiences personally, and it has to change. But I don't know if you all heard about the strategy that was launched. I don't know.
Yeah, we've been involved in that. Yeah,
brilliant. So I have hope that it's going to change, and with people like Davina McCall standing up, making noise. Davina McCall did a program on Channel 4, I believe, a couple of weeks ago about menopause and all sorts of myths and things. But she's involved in menopause charity, and they're now funding places for GPs to do training. But I mean, I do a lot of clubhouses with, there's one called the Menopause Lounge, and I'm on those with a stack of other professionals, a stack of GPs, and you get to speak to us as professionals directly. It's incredible. But there is so many of us now shouting about this that I have real hope that in 10 years time it's going to be different.
I think Clubhouse is going to have to be the next thing I join.
It's really interesting. It is like listening to a podcast but being able to speak to people. So being able to speak to a doctor, ask a doctor an actual question. It's amazing.
Yeah, that does sound absolutely fantastic. You have been so good. This has been really, really, really good. What's Nicola said? She hates to say that she used to be so slim with a great memory, loads of energy, and so confident at work. Yeah, I think that's all of us. As women get older, it seems to be we just lose everything.
Isn't it? I'm hoping that I lose so much memory that I don't remember being really capable. Oh, it's hilarious.
You are more used than a garden slug, Nicola.
Oh.
You are amazing.
Yeah, of course.
We love you.
And you know what? So I do a lot of work in sort of like the metaphysical as well. And going through the menopause journey, there's a big bit of work by a woman called Alexandra Pope, and she was the first person to start talking about a woman's menstrual cycle as being her path actually to spirituality, because we have this whole thing playing out in us. And she talks about the menopause as being this time where sort of post-menopausal, you know, when we think about the archetype of that, it's the shamana or the crone, these old wise women, not the old women who are stuck in an old people's home and not spoken to, like the women who have so much wisdom. But the difference is during menopause, you know, like the reason that we forget is because we can't be in that logical brain anymore. But that logical brain actually is quite patriarchal. It's so that we've got words and we can justify things. Now we have to sometimes we don't even have words. We've only got noises that emanate, but there's this intuition and this wisdom and this compassion. So all of a sudden, when we're going through a menopause, no matter where that menopause has come from, and also I hear this from people who are doing the transitioning thing with hormones, all of a sudden I've got these two different brains. I'm running two channels. Occasionally I've got words. Sometimes I've just got feelings and knowledge. And so we have to start trusting that whilst I don't have the words, I have got the knowledge and the wisdom and the feelings, and just communicating it differently.
Yeah, there's a few books from someone called Lisa Lister.
I love her.
Yeah, and she talks a lot about that. And me and Crystal have loads of conversations about like going into the crone energy. And like, I wish I knew back in my teenage years what I know now about like periods and going through all of them different cycles of your life is going through some really, really important things. And again, I think it's teaching people at a younger age about this stuff and going back to before patriarchy was a thing.
100%. And if I look at the positivity message in it, and you know, sometimes when we feel really crap, we have to dig deep to find anything positive. But if I look at the positivity message in it, we are in the middle of, you know, it's awful out there. It is awful. And so no wonder there's so many of us going through menopause early, because we need as many deeply wise women who have been through, and men, but you know, I'm talking specifically about this particular journey, that have been through something, because this is painful, and we grow through it, because through this we find this wisdom and this compassion. And so now we can actually help move the world forward. So of course, my friend said to me, who's in her mid-50s, she went, of course, for what you're trying to do in the world, of course you had to be menopausal. She's like, of course. I was like, I get it.
Yeah. And it's one of them things, isn't it, where the people in the crone energy, they want to look after you, and they want to share their knowledge, and it's lovely. It's really, really lovely. But Becca, I have a puggle, and I think someone's just put something through my door, so he went a bit mad in the background. Sorry about that. It's been fantastic having you on, Claire.
Thank you so much for having me. I've loved it. It's
been really, really insightful, like massively. And yeah, everyone's saying thank you in the chat as well. It's been one of them ones that has been like, oh, that all makes sense.
So if I can just sort of say, please do check me out on balancedwellness.co.uk or clairesnowdon.com, clairesnowdon-darling.com, sorry. There is loads and loads of free stuff on our websites, and also on Instagram. We've got so many infographics so on the college and also Balanced Wellness, loads and loads and loads. And I've got loads of talks on hormones and menopause, and like the entry price of those is really cheap. It's like £7, and like I said, loads of free stuff. And we are running this training. The world is desperate for practitioners. You know this. You've been saying it yourself. So we are absolutely putting the clarion call out for people to train as practitioners, not just kinesiologists, because we actually run a wellness coaching course as well with all the hormone protocols.
Yeah, Nicola, if you're quitting your job, maybe this is a calling. Maybe you were destined to be on this webinar, and you should definitely look into it.
Yeah, that's the College of Functional Wellness. Check that out. In fact, I think it's functional-wellness.co.uk. I'll send you the links, then you can stick them on.
Yeah. We'll put this up on our webpage, and we'll put up all the links to your different social medias and your webpage and everything.
Amazing, thank you.
So everyone knows where you are, because I think everyone with endo needs to at least have a look into it.
Yeah, I agree. The more we educate and empower ourselves, the less we can be fobbed off, and the more we can actually take control of our journey.
Absolutely. Right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
And we'll see you on the next call, I guess.
Lovely to meet you all.
And you, Claire. Thank you so much.
Welcome, Jodie.
Bye, everyone.